We're driving north to a border that some Ukrainians would defend to the death, but which others wish had never been drawn. That's Russia beyond the fence. For a quarter century after Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, there was no obvious line. But now there are barriers and barbed wire, trenches and berms, constant surveillance. Since Russia sent forces into eastern Ukraine 8 years ago, the Ukrainians have feared that Russia might invade on this border too.
Якщо б ми з вами стояли на цьому місці у 2014 році, то ви б не побачили всього того, що ви бачите зараз.
Despite all the shouting from London and Washington, it's all quiet on the northern front, for now. From the watchtower, the Ukrainians can see about 10 kilometers into Russian territory, and there are American reconnaissance planes overhead all the time, keeping an eye. Still, this is one of the more vulnerable parts of the border, because there's a road from here which goes straight down to Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city. Kharkiv itself has changed. A majority here speak Russian as their first language, and many supported the Russians in the 2014 war. Now the city's a magnet for young people who work in tech and look west to Europe. And they're not letting the current crisis interfere with their lives. No reason, then, to cancel Kharkiv's equivalent of Crufts. The show must go on. The Russian terrier is rather larger than you might expect, but apparently not threatening.
They have the name Russian Terrier, but they are Ukrainians once. They live in Ukraine.
It's the first show for Yuliana Slipchenko's Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever, Cheddar. She travelled from Kiev with no fear of being near the border.
No, I'm not afraid because it's my country. Why I should afraid? I don't know. I think Putin should be afraid.
What should Putin be afraid
yes.
of?
Yes. I think we're a strong country. We have beautiful, strong people, and we're standing for our country.
But after 8 years of sporadic fighting over the part of eastern Ukraine still controlled by Russia, defiance doesn't mean denial.
I have my classmate. He go to the war 7 years ago, and he died.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and I know what's war. It's terrifying.
Comfort for some in the church. But in Ukraine, religion is contested too. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church used to come under the Patriarch in Moscow, who's very close to President Putin. 3 years ago, it split away. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is now self-governing, independent from Russia, just like the country. For some in Kharkiv, that's complicated. A tiny church on the outskirts of town is frequented by Cossacks. In 2014, Cossack fighters rallied to the Russian, not the Ukrainian cause. But today, the priest is fearful of getting on the wrong side of the Ukrainian government, so he's very careful in what he says.
То, что казачество ориентировано на Россию, это абсолютно неправильно. Почему? Потому что тема казачества разделение претерпела в 2014 году. То есть четкое произошло определение. То есть, может быть, конечно, у кого-то какие-то и имеются симпатии, но это не значит, что это все масштабное явление, потому что очень много казаческих организаций патриотически настроенных. Вот, очень много казаческих организаций, которые, скажем так, стараются вообще свою общественную деятельность вести вне политики.
Up on the border, a village frozen in time. In Soviet days, there was a telephone exchange here underground, linking two parts of one country. Now only old people are left, but even they are looking west for support.
Ми слухаємо телевізор і бачимо, чуємо, що все-таки зараз Європа більше повернулася до нас, чим раніше нуль емоцій, собственно, було.
The Russian build-up across the border has served only to alienate Ukrainians. Even here, nostalgia for the certainties of the past is fading. Most say Russia should pull back and leave Ukraine to forge its own future.
Well, Boris Johnson is just one of several European leaders visiting Kiev this week. But what will that mean on the ground in Ukraine, Lindsey?
Well, Kathy, the Polish Prime Minister is here today. The Dutch are expected later in the week. And I think what that lady who I met in the village was saying was, look, it's really important that people see the difficult situation that we're in. That kind of solidarity means something. But there's also this new military pact. We're not quite sure of the impact of that between Ukraine, the UK and Poland. And certainly aid has tremendously improved the army here. And President Zelensky was saying there's going to be another 100,000 soldiers in the next 3 years. That can't stop a Russian invasion, but it can make it much more costly for Russia. And I think that that was what Boris Johnson meant when he said that the mothers of Russian soldiers should be paying attention.
And how are President Putin's words today likely to affect the situation, do you think?
Well, he did definitely talk about diplomacy, which I think will be encouraging for the Ukrainians. And he said that he would be meeting President Macron, who is somebody who I suspect he thinks might be a little more to his liking to talk with, rather than, say, the British or the Americans. And then, of course, he had Viktor Orban of Hungary with him today. Now, Viktor Orban is the most pro-Russian EU and NATO leader. He said that he could try and forge some kind of peace. I don't know about that. But what was fascinating was the body language. That Viktor Orban is one of very few people who's seen President Putin recently, and they drank champagne to celebrate on absolutely opposite ends of a massive hall. Now, this is a man, President Putin, who is very worried about catching COVID. He really doesn't want to be close to anyone. He really is there in his palace by himself a lot of the time. And he is, I suppose you could say, paranoid. His talk today, what if the Ukrainians try and get Crimea back by force? What if they then enter NATO? What if? Then that would mean that Russia would be forced into a war with NATO. This is the way he thinks, spinning all of these possibilities round in his mind. And it makes him a very difficult man to negotiate with.
Lindsey, great analysis, great hat. Thank you.